Hello everyone. Let us get started with C++ certification training. So we will look at what is object-oriented programming in C++. The topics that we are going to cover are as follows. We will look at what is object-oriented programming. Then we will look at features of object-oriented programming. And finally, why is C++ partially object-oriented? So let's begin with what is object-oriented programming. Now, as you can see from this slide in front of you, object-oriented programming is a programming paradigm which aims at tying the data to the function which operates on it. It prevents the data from being accessed from or by other functions and ensures data security. So what it basically means is that if you have a class in place, so let's say I have this class here, this is one class, and I have one more class with me. Let's say this is another class, right? Now with these two classes, what I can do is I can create some data here and I can create some data in this class as well, right? Now, as you can see, it prevents the data from being accessed by other functions and ensures data security. So the data which is in this class, let's say class A and this is class B, for example, the data within this can only be accessed by member function of A and this can be accessed by member function of B, provided the data has been defined as or declared as private. So coming back, some of the characteristics of OOPS are as follows. It divides the program into multiple smaller units known as objects. So we have covered classes and objects in a different modules in details. So in this particular discussion, when we create a class, from class we can create objects. So that way it helps us to divide program into smaller units which are actually objects. Then each object consists of data and its own set of functions to access the data. So if you will look at this diagram which is in front of you, this is an object of a given class. So let's say I had a class employee, for example, this is my class employee. And then I have object A of employee and object B of employee. Now for this particular object, there will be some data within that, right? Let's say name of that employee and name of another employee, right? Now this data member can be accessed only by the member function, which is this one for this particular object, right? Same goes with the other object. So each object consists of data and its own set of functions to access that data. Now the data of an object is hidden and can only be accessed by the function belonging to that object. This I have already explained. Then objects can communicate among each other through functions. So let's say if I have an object 1, which is, or rather object A and object B, if I have to communicate between these two objects, what I need to do is I create object of that particular class maybe, or if it is a same class or another class, whatever it is, I can create an object of a class and then call the method in that class using that particular object. So this is how the communication happens. So this is representation of the organization of data and functions in an object and communication between objects in the case of OOPS. So let's go to the next slide now. So what are the features of object-oriented programming? We have following important features: that it has object, it has class, there is a concept of encapsulation, there is a concept of inheritance, polymorphism, and abstraction involved. So let us look at all of this one by one in details. So I will go to my next slide. Now what is a class and what is an object? A class is user-defined data type which has data member and member functions, but no memory is allocated for it. Also, it can be accessed by creating an instance of a given class known as object. So we know the distinction between a class and an object, right? Our class is blueprint or a skeleton of an object. So these details, they have been covered separately in more details in a module called classes and objects. So for the time being, please understand that class is a blueprint and object is a instance of that class or a blueprint, right? Now, object is an instance of a class. It is a variable of class type. It consists of data members and member functions defined by the class. Objects use the member functions to access and modify the data members. So for example, if I had a class, let's say this is a class, let's say employee, right? EMP, I'll call it for now, open bracket, close bracket with curly braces. So I can have attributes here and functions here, right? So how do I create object of this? I'll simply say EMP E1, right? Or E2 or whatever name you want to give. And after that, you can access the member of that particular class, which is attribute or a function by saying E1 dot attribute name or function name, right? So here I have taken an example of a class maybe, which could be a fruit type, right? Or it could be a mobile. So we can represent these entities or objects with the help of a class, right? What is meant by that is, let's say I have a class fruit, right? And I have a class mobile. Now I can say fruit and I can give it name as, so this is the class name, and then I can say apple, right? So I'm creating an object of that fruit class and it is an apple. Now, in order to make it apple, I can of course assign attribute values to this particular object apple as per apple. Same goes with the other types with this orange as you see here. Same applies, or same concept applies here, that if I have a class mobile, I can create an object and it could be maybe iPhone or an Android, right? So this is how we make use of classes and objects in C++ programming. So then next is encapsulation. What is encapsulation? So encapsulation, it is the process of binding the data to a function forming a single unit known as class. And this concept is known as encapsulation. So basically the idea here is this, that you can think of it as a capsule as you see in front of you, right? And then you can define members which are generally private and functions which are public. And with the help of this member function, you can access this data member. So this is a concept of encapsulation. So basically encapsulation is combination of en plus capsule, right? So you encapsulate the data and the functions together within a class. This concept is known as encapsulation. Now encapsulation can be achieved by making the data members private and the member function as public to enable them to access the data members, right? Now it prevents the data member of a class from being accessed from anywhere outside the class. So let's say you have another function here, or rather another class, right? So they cannot directly access the data members, or rather this class cannot directly access the data members. If they have to access, they have to go via the member function, and then only the access is allowed. So this way we achieve data protection, or this is a concept of encapsulation. Now it enables the data member to be accessed only by the member function of that particular class. This I have already explained to you. Now the next important concept is abstraction. So let's look at what is abstraction. Abstraction is the process of representing only the relevant information about the data while hiding the background implementation details is known as abstraction. So basically, what does it mean? Let's understand it in a little bit more details. So we can achieve abstraction using class as well as using header files in C++, right? Now, what is in abstraction using class, the visibility of the components of class, that is data member and member function, can be decided by the class by using or specifying access modifier, right? Now, therefore, abstraction can be implemented by hiding implementation details, which could be data, by making them private, and the information to be displayed can be made public. So maybe we can use the functions to access the private member of the class in C++. This is a concept of abstraction which is achieved with the help of a given class. Now we can also make use of this concept or implement this concept using header files. We have used header files in good number of our programming, so let's understand that. So abstraction using header files. Header files are used to import predefined functions into a program. For example, in the header file stdio.h, there are functions cin and cout. So basically, we use these two functions to read and write values, right, in the program, or rather read the value and write the value, right? The utility of this function is to know to all, or rather we all know the utility of these functions is known, right? But do we really know the process implementation of these functions? No, we do not know, because the details are hidden from the user. This is how abstraction is implemented using header files. So basically, the point is that by simply importing the header file, we get access to those functions, and we just go ahead and use those functions instead of worrying about the underlying details. This is a concept of abstraction using header files in C++. Then we have next concept which is very important is polymorphism. Now what is polymorphism? Polymorphism means the ability to have multiple forms basically. Poly means many, morphos means kind. So it is a concept of a feature exhibiting multiple forms, you can call, right? Now in OOPS, it is the ability of an operation to behave differently in different instances. So what does it mean? It means that we have two concepts, compile time and runtime polymorphism. Now, under this, we have function overloading and operator overloading. So what is function overloading? It is a process of using functions having same name to perform different operations. So basically, you can have a function sum, for example, in which you can pass two arguments, integer a and b, or you could pass three arguments, a, comma, b, comma, c, right? Of course, you have to specify the data type. So this is a concept of function overloading where you have same function name but different number of arguments or different types of argument. This is a concept of function overloading. Similarly, you have operator overloading. It is a process of making operator behave differently in different instances. So let's say you have plus operator, right? You can add maybe a two integer, int plus int you can do, or you can create your own object1 plus object2 and add them. In order to implement this addition, of course, you have to override this operator within the class of this particular object, but it can be achieved. So this is a concept of operator overloading in C++. Then we also have runtime polymorphism, which is known as dynamic binding. So in the case of virtual functions, how it is implemented, let's see, it is a function in the base class which is overridden in the derived class and is used to specify the version of function to be called by the compiler. Okay, so to understand this, let's say I have a base class which is a car, right? And I have another class which is derived class which is BMW, let's say, for example. Now this has a method start engine for example, right? And maybe this has also a start engine, right? So basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to override an existing functionality which is already available in superclass in my subclass. And this is achieved using virtual functions. So we are going to look at details of virtual function implementation in a separate module. But basically here the concept is that we have a function in base class which is overridden in the derived class, and we call a specific version of that particular function, right? So that is virtual functions. And then we also have pure virtual functions. What it is a virtual function for which function definition is not required. So there is a separate module, as I stated, virtual functions, where we are going to look at details of how this concept work in the case of C++. So moving on, then we have inheritance. Now what is inheritance? Inheritance is the process where a child class or a subclass derives inherits some of the properties or functionalities from the parent or superclass. Okay, now here the some properties is important, right? Because if you have a superclass, let's say, and if you have a subclass, so if you have a subclass here, right? So if this is class A and this is class B, right? If you are trying to inherit B into A, for example, right? Now what will happen depending upon the access modifier that has been specified here, some of the properties will get inherited, right? So therefore we talk of some of the properties, not all are being inherited, right? And in the subclass, you can define your own maybe properties attribute as you might want to do it. So inheritance promotes reusability of code. A new class can be created by deriving some properties from the base superclass and add some new functionalities to it. So basically I can take the class A, inherit its properties and create class B, and I can add some additional properties, right? For example, if this is grandfather, grandfather will have or pass on some attributes to the father, right? And father will have its own characteristics, own features, right? So this is a inherited version of grandfather. Same goes with the children, boy and girl, right? So they will also inherit some features here. They will have some features here, and this boy will have its own unique attributes and this girl will have its own unique attributes, right? So in this example, the father inherits properties from the grandfather and the boy and girl inherit properties of both the father and grandfather. So inheritance hierarchy goes from here to, so let me just clear this. So it passes on to here, and from here also it passes on here. So if you had a class, let's say A, B and C, right? If you have a public member here, here also, so what will happen? If you're inheriting this using public access modifier, it will come here, the attribute. And again, if you're inheriting, if C is inheriting B, that public attribute will be available in the C class as well. So this is like the level of inheritance goes from A to B to finally to the C class as well. Now C++ is partially object-oriented programming. What does it mean? Some of the reasons why C++ is partially object-oriented is that creating a class or object is optional, right? Now it is possible to write a valid C++ program without creating class or object because the main is not inside the class. Therefore, in presence of main outside, creation of class objects become optional, which is violation of OOPS principle. So basically, I mean, you can pretty much have a, a program without a class, right? So you can simply go ahead and define a program with the main here, let's say, right? And you can uh, perform various operations here. You can define function, let's say void function is display, right? Right, so you can pretty much do a lot of things, and this is not object oriented concept. This is a concept which we use in C, which is procedural language, right? So this is allowed, although as a good principle we should go for object oriented programming concept while making use of C++. Then global variables concept is there. C++ supports the use of global variable which can be accessed from anywhere in the program. This violates the concept of encapsulation. So earlier we had seen that in the case of encapsulation, we define private members within the class, right? To protect them from being accessed by anywhere in the program or any class or any other functions, right? So this is in violation to the OOPS principle, but we have a concept of global variable in C++. Then there is a concept of friend function. A friend function or friend class is one that can be used to access the private and protected member of a class by declaring them as friend of that class. This also is a violation of principle of object-oriented programming, but these features are available in C++. So this is for your information to know. While you are doing programming, you should be aware that these features capabilities are also available. So because of these reasons, C++ is not considered as completely object-oriented programming language. Completely meaning you can in fact do procedural programming also with the help of C++. So moving on. So to summarize our discussion, at the end of this session, you should be able to understand what is object-oriented programming and understand the features of object-oriented or OOPS. So in summary, so far what we discussed is we looked at what is object-oriented programming, we looked at various features of OOPS, and then we finally looked at what are the various, or rather what makes C++ partially object-oriented programming language. That's all I have in this discussion. Thank you so much for your time.